Okay. We're going to start with In the Heart of the Sea. Because in the first couple of weeks of December, not a whole lot happens.
Nope.
So this is where because this was supposed to come out in March.
Right.
And then they put it here in hopes of awards chances. I guess we'll see what happens with that.
Tech awards, maybe, but I think
Clearly.
That's the only thing.
So, yeah. So what this is, if you are unaware, is Ron Howard doing the story that you kept calling it Ron Howard's Moby Dick movie.
Yeah.
And I was confused because every time, for some reason, I was thinking pirates because I had no idea what this movie was.
You were thinking pirates.
So
yeah, there's pirates in this movie, I guess.
So I was like, and I was really unsettled by that because I was like, fucking pirates, I don't want to do that again.
Ron Howard is pirates though. That'd be fun.
But then it's the true story that inspired Melville to write Moby Dick,
right? Which
we actually see Ben Whishaw as Melville go to Brendan Gleeson, who is the last surviving person, and the movie is relayed to him, and that's like a framing device that we keep cutting back to. At first I thought it was going to be bookending, and I was like, wow, they're really wasting Gleeson and Ben Whishaw here, but they cut back to them throughout the movie. Yeah, that got my hopes up a little bit, because number one, I got to look at the cast list.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And secondly, I'm not, like, I haven't read Moby Dick, and the only really association I have with it is that I saw John Huston's movie with Gregory Peck, which is incredible. I really love that movie, so that gave me hope for this. Okay. Well, obviously, the head of our cast is Chris Hemsworth, reuniting with Ron Howard after Rush. And he is basically, we get the introduction with him and his wife, and like, at first sight, I liked it, because it was like, the way that it is, this movie does look really good.
Oh, yeah, it does.
The production design and all of the, I struggle to say cinematography, because I think that was more visual effects, but
right,
all in that area, right. And it was to the point to where, even though this is the true story that inspired the fictional story, just the way this looked in, like, Hemsworth's little hometown here, or whatever it is, it looked very storybook-like. And then there's the whole, if there's one thing that lets this movie down, honestly, it's probably its writing. Because there's a lot of, like, as soon as that happened, and I was like, you have Brendan Gleeson and Ben Whishaw, and you're like, oh, this is going well. And then you have Hemsworth in this, and as I've said before, Hemsworth may not be, like, an actor's actor or anything, but he really, his charisma will either bring life to a movie or, you know, it'll die.
Look how much fun he had Cabin in the Woods. Seriously.
So, he's definitely somebody I'd like to see in more movies, like, you know, Black Hat notwithstanding, I suppose. But,
right.
Well, the thing is that once we have this nice little 5 to 10 minute area where I'm like, okay, I can get into this fine. Good. The characters started speaking to each other, and I was like, oh, I don't know anymore. Because it's one of those things where it's just, it seemed like the screenwriter's job was very easy, because they pretty much just had to speak in cliches.
Right.
Because it's the whole, Hemsworth's like, I must get out of this town and become a whaler and be something. And she's like, those are your father's words. That's an exact line. Those are your father's words talking. And then we have the very abrupt goodbye scene where he has to promise he's gonna come back, and then I was like, oh, I think this is gonna start looking real familiar now, in a lot of ways. So, we're introduced to the rest of our cast. We have our captain, who is Benjamin Walker, who was, you probably know him as one of the other. He was young Liam Neeson in Kinsey, because, as you can see, the uncanny resemblance to Liam Neeson is present, and he was Abraham Lincoln in Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Those are the two that jumped to me first. And he's the captain who's not very, you know, he distances himself from his crew and he's above them and all that. And then we have Hemsworth's friend, who is Cillian Murphy, which is great. And then the rest of the characters just kind of merge into the background, and there's a lot of them too. So I'm not. Did I overlook anything?
Well, there's the main character. Well, the character.
Tom Holland, of course.
We're focusing on Tom Holland's character, who
yeah.
apparently can't stay away from disasters.
Yeah, I guess, and water. Keep him away from water.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul Anderson was in there too. I forgot. So the thing is, this is one of those movies where I'm pretty much stuck with identifying the character by the actor's name.
Yep, exactly.
So it's like, if you don't put famous faces on here that I can recognize, I'm not really gonna care a whole lot about the drama that's going on. What there's a lot of. And another thing about the kid character is the fact that it's kind of one of two things. You don't, like, if you don't, obviously he is, Brendan Gleeson's character, but the issue is, you see this kid, and he's the young one on the group, and they just kind of pay him no mind, because he's, you know, younger, and so fuck him. And then we get this scene where they talk about, the pins that they wear. And he's saying, like, I'm gonna get 12 pins and stuff like that. And he's doing his big, you know, plucky kid thing, despite the fact that people keep telling him how worthless he is. It's going to be one of two things, if you're not paying attention to the wraparound story, which is, he's either going to basically become our main protagonist and maybe possibly save the day, or he's going to die.
Right.
That's what happens to the plucky kid.
Very true.
So you start to kind of get Captain's Courageous vibes from this after a while. You get a lot of vibes of a lot of different things. When I talk about how this movie might be better if it wasn't for the fact that it's all so familiar, probably too familiar. Another one of those things is, one of our first big scenes is a storm. Because you can't be on a ship without a storm. So you're going to have obvious rain machines with your green screen in the background. And your set's going to be tilting while your actors get thrown around. And they're screaming ship lingo at each other. Has that scene ever been interesting in any movie?
No.
Has that scene ever really... Maybe there was one way back in the day that did it, but...
before it became
that
cliche.
doesn't come to mind for me. Maybe Lieutenant Dan flipping off God is the closest thing we've gotten to an interesting scene involving a storm and a ship. But that's just something that's never been... I think it's that scene happened and I was like, oh, okay, we're in one of these movies. Marvelous. This is going to be enticing. And then we have the relationship between Benjamin Walker and Hemsworth's characters, which is like a Bly Christian thing going on. Until it turns into... After a while, I thought we were going to get like a really, really huge budget version of Lifeboat. But then it kind of turned into this concoction of Castaway and Unbroken.
Which on the surface, that sounds good.
Yeah, of course I'm talking about the portion of Unbroken where they're stranded.
Right.
There's just a lot more of them. That's why I jumped to Lifeboat first. But, it just has you constantly thinking of other movies. And then, this might have been the nail in its coffin, which is, I can totally see it. And it's totally, you know, something I can understand. It's just that I saw an interview with Ron Howard where he talked about his huge inspiration for deciding to go ahead and make this movie was when he saw Life of Pi.
Yep.
Which you get a lot of different vibes from. And, yeah, there are a lot of scenes in this movie that just kind of made me wish I was watching Life of Pi. But the thing about it is... because there's well, the thing about it is, despite the fact that you have all this, we've seen it before stuff. The stuff with the whale is quite enticing because we've not really seen it on such a grand scale as this. Like, they really went all out with the whale scenes, which is great because that's like I guess our main selling point, I guess, if you want to call it that. Though the only other time we've seen it on such a grand scale is, of course, Life of Pi, though the situations are quite drastically different, because while Life of Pi is also a survival story, by all means, it's also really, like, mystical and dreamlike. And this one's all about the survival, and when you see the whale, it's not, oh my god, that's incredible. It's, oh my god, we're all gonna die.
Right.
So it's two different things, but still. So there are things handled in this movie in a way that, like I said, we've seen them before, just not quite on as big of a scale, which is good. But those are kind of few and far between. It's basically, that's enough. If you want to talk about how much these whale scenes play into it, you could also basically say it's Jaws with a whale.
Yeah.
Because it comes, and then it goes, and this is just what the movie is. And while we're on that subject, I'm wondering how many people, I don't want to necessarily say too much, I suppose, but I'm wondering how many people will be let down by this movie's anticlimax. Because it's just kind of doing its thing, and then we're just done.
Things happen, that's it.
So yeah, to its credit, surprisingly, like very much surprisingly, despite all this kind of uninteresting stuff going on, with only occasional exciting things and interesting things, the pacing is actually quite good. This movie despite everything I just said, the movie at least did not feel long. It's 2 hours and 2 minutes, but I thought that was kind of... The flow was actually quite well, and actually once it started going, it got there really quick. So, you can commend it for that. I think it's just, its main issue, though, is, I think we'd have a lot more drama going on if it was if characters were more engaging and more distinguishable. But, like I said, unless they have a recognizable face on them, from somebody you've seen in other movies, there's just kind of, well, we lost that person, and we lost that person, and it's like, oh, well.
It's like a typical war movie.
It's like, at least do what The Perfect Storm did and put famous faces on everybody. That helps. And yeah, I know you're not necessarily supposed to go off who you can get, it's how engaging you can make the character, but if you're not going to do one, at least help the audience out and do the other. If you're not capable of one. There's that, I suppose.
What about Hemsworth's accent?
I'm
curious what you thought of that, because you didn't mention it.
As I have to keep saying, accents are not really something I notice or pay attention to. But
it was very, very noticeable for me.
I didn't. That's not something I really noticed. So, yeah, and it's also, I know Ron Howard, beloved as he is, also gets a lot of shit.
Right. Mostly
from film snob types. That think his movies are too happy, or that they're too, I don't know, uplifting or something. One of these days, Ron Howard needs to just do the biggest downer ending of all time and shut everybody the fuck up. But, but the thing about it is, I think he's in the position he's in because he does his job really well. Like, that partnership between Ron Howard and Brian Grazer should be what, like, all the powers that be in Hollywood should be like. Sadly, they're not, but when I think of, like, when you hear the stories and how things come to be, when you really think of, like, when Hollywood is really doing its thing, the partnership between Ron Howard and Brian Grazer immediately comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
But Ron Howard's direction has never really been an issue to me in anything I can think of. I'm not really a fan of the Langdon movies. The Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons aren't really my thing, but still, he's never really done anything I've had a huge problem with that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there's one or two out there, but right now they aren't coming to me. However, there are a lot of moments in this movie that I thought were weirdly handled. Where we get, like, I don't know if it's supposed to kind of contrast the grand scale we're on and all other aspects, but there's a lot of scenes when we're just with the crew and we're kind of, you know, just with them and their close quarters. When things are shot from weird angles and we get really uncomfortable close-ups, and not necessarily because the scene's supposed to be uncomfortable, it's just the close-ups felt weirdly placed. And look weird. It's kind of like the Requiem for a Dream shot of Jennifer Connelly, where the camera's in front of her and follows her. It's shots kind of like that. And those seem really weird in a movie like this. And those angles that are just, I have no idea what went behind those decisions, but yeah, this movie kind of falls somewhere in the middle. It mostly just has to, it's trying to overcome that dullness when the scenes that are really taking off aren't happening, which are kind of, one's overpowered by the other, in the negative sense, but it's not bad or anything, it's just something I had trouble investing in, so whatever that means to you. I think, did I miss anything? I think that's about it.
Doesn't look like it.
Alright, our next and final movie this week is Room. Now talking about, obviously I've had him label spoilers next to it.
Yep.
And that is only because I'm not sure what people know going into this movie. Because when I was watching the movie, not knowing what was happening, it almost kind of felt like a bit of a twist when it went in the direction it was going, which is like midway through. Maybe a little before the midway point is when it goes in that direction. Mm-hmm. And all that, I didn't know this is where it was going to go. I had no idea. Like, I might as, except for the fact that I knew, like, William H. Macy and Joan Allen were in it, and they had to come in somehow. I probably would have spent a lot of the movie thinking that The Room was where it took place entirely. So, I don't know. And then, of course, after I saw it, I was trying to distinguish how to do this, and whether or not everything after The Room is a spoiler or not. So I went back, and I watched the trailer. And sure enough, pretty much every single scene of this movie is in that trailer. So, apparently people who have seen the trailer know what they're in for. Like, exactly. Trouble is I don't know who's going in not having seen that trailer and don't know where this goes. So, that is my whole giant prolonged explanation of why I am suggesting to put spoilers.
So we're doing kind of like a mini spoiler alert, basically.
I don't know. So obviously, the main focus here, above all else, clearly, it could be how the movie itself makes you feel, it could be how it's written, it could be, William H. Macy and Joan Allen and the guy that played the new husband. Really, the main focus that everybody zones in on after seeing this movie are the performances of Brie Larson and Jacob Tremblay, who have this... Apparently they're like really close in real life now, too. Which totally makes sense, because there's very much a mother-son dynamic here. I almost turned into the characters in the movie and said daughter instead of son by accident. Because he's been trapped in there for so long and has never cut his hair. All the characters that see him outside are under the impression that he's a girl. And I don't blame them, of course. So, and it's very... Honestly, can you imagine what I was getting vibes from, naturally? It was basically like, the movie seems very, very bleak given the circumstances.
Right.
But watching it, I kept thinking, this is like, despite the whole suggested rape and all that, and the whole being held prisoner thing, this is essentially a much more upbeat version of Old Boy.
Yeah.
At least for the first half. So, and it's interesting to see how they have done this, because she's been in there since she was
17.
17, yeah. And obviously he's been in there since birth. So there's kind of seeing how they have to live that life and all that. And there are things in there that I was trying to, that they don't really go into. Maybe the book goes into it. That's a whole other thing people can say. But there are some things in the movie that are kind of left a bit of a mystery. One that kind of stood out to me was when I mean, I'm sure it makes sense if you think about it without any other further explanation, but that moment when he wants to keep the mouse as a pet.
Mm.
And obviously they refer to the room that they're in just as room and nothing else. That's just what it is. Like, instead of saying, like, the world or earth or home, it is just room. So when when he wants the mouse, she says, we can't keep him because we don't have enough room, and then she changes room to space when she realizes what she says. And I thought that just one line leaves a whole lot of dissection open.
Right.
Of what exactly they've built in this, however many years they've been in there. I forget how old he is.
There's a...
or how long she was in there before he was born. Yeah, because of the birthday.
He was 5, yeah.
Yeah.
With the birthday cake.
So there's that. And then I was worried, though, because once we get to that moment, that really, really intense scene, when she finally gets him to escape, and she wraps him in the rug, and he has to pretend he's dead. That whole build-up, because every time they've tried to get out so far, they're just shut down immediately. Their plan is foiled every time. She goes as far as to make herself puke to make it look like he's extremely sick, and that plan gets all fucked up. So and once again, when you don't know that the movie is about to go in a different direction, you're just kind of waiting for him to get caught. It's not one of those, you don't really know how it's going to turn out unless you've seen the fucking trailer, apparently.
Right.
So that scene, going in blind, is really, really intense. Because you really, especially this early into the movie, you don't expect him to make it out. You expect it to just kind of be this endless cycle of they try to get out and they fail and repeat. But right in the middle of the movie, it actually works. And then there's the whole scene. On top of that, the intensity of that whole scene, and then the great big scene where he's taken to the cops and then he is able to inadvertently direct them to where she is. And it's this big, giant moment where they go... It reminded me of the race to the hospital in Prisoners.
Smartest cops on film ever. Oh my god.
And when they finally get there, and at this point, I started to get really worried. Because I was like, this movie just reached monumental heights. Right in the middle.
Right.
So, what follows this is going to have to be, like, insanely fantastic to keep up with itself. I thought that was really ballsy, having the big emotional highlight of your movie right in the middle.
Right.
Because that's really, really, really risky for your second half. But then, of course, it does maintain those emotional moments throughout, because she's got to adapt to everything and come to terms with... There's the moment where she's looking in her yearbook, and she's bitter because she doesn't know where everybody else is because they moved on with their life. They weren't, kidnapped for ever how many years. So it does manage to keep this... It does never reach the heights of that middle scene where they just kind of... It's like they blew their load all at once, because it's like... the two big... It's really two of the biggest emotional scenes in the movie back to back. So that's a whole other monster of emotion coming at you. But they did really, really pay off, though, with the last scene. The last scene pretty much reached the heights of this, so that's really... If you're gonna reach the heights of your heights, the last scene's the best place to do it. So leave your audience with that, please. That's great. And as far as the other performances, apart from their, you know, because Tremblay definitely could have fallen into the annoying kid category. This is the second week in a row we've avoided that. The child actors are getting better as the year progresses.
They really are.
It took till December, but we got there. And he could have very much descended into the annoying kid. And for a while there, he was, just because he had no choice. He's a 5-year-old kid that knows not anything outside of one confined space. I suppose we can forgive him if he freaks out from time to time.
Yeah.
But those moments when he's out and we see him adapting to everything, this movie would not have worked without a stellar performance with that. Like, if that stuff was unconvincing, this whole movie was going to be unconvincing.
Right.
And yeah, the same goes for Brie Larson, because she's on a whole other end to it, because we're seeing it from the perspective of somebody who's never seen the world before, and somebody who hasn't in like 6 years or so. Which are going to be two totally different perspectives, and we get both of those really, really vividly because of them. So all this awards talk that's been going on, and Larson's like competing to win is the buzz right now. It's still early to jump to that, but it's good enough to where I wouldn't argue that, and I don't think anybody else would either.
No, not one bit.
Oh, and yes, the supporting performances. Like I said, I really like the guy that was the new husband, where he's kind of the... Well, obviously the parents are all out of sorts, and he's kind of the... Obviously he's at a grounded point in all this, to where he's the one that can be, like... He treats the kid... Like, when he's talking about, that little bonding moment they have with the cereal and stuff like that. That's a really nice scene, where he knows Jack's up there, but doesn't want to, you know, say he's hungry or bother anybody, so he just kind of, you know, gets him in there just kind of casually, and then... So he doesn't necessarily have to ask for anything, it's just kind of there. And he's a real kind of comfort zone at the point in this movie that needs it, because we have Macy, who is very shut off from this, because he can't look at him, because... He's basically... Jack is the product of rape.
Right.
His daughter's rape, specifically. So Macy really wants... I think it's kind of... We get the idea that he's not blaming the kid for this. He has nothing against the kid, like, personally. It's just the whole idea of his existence is that his daughter was raped. And that's kind of the whole... So there's just kind of a distance there. And I was wondering whether or not he was going to get an arc, but they don't really take his character that farther than that. Which I suppose is probably the more realistic way.
He disappears rather quickly, too.
So, because sadly, unfortunately, that's probably how it would really go down. So,
yeah.
And then we have Joan Allen, who is, you know, always fantastic. And obviously the haircutting scene is a big emotional scene. Just that one line that Jack says to her, I think was... People were reaching their emotional breaking point yet again in this movie. Like, I had heard somebody say that there weren't too many people in there, because there was something else going on in the theater we were in at the time that was keeping everybody else busy, but I had heard about showings where there were a lot of people, and the reunion scene where Jack's in the police car and she comes running up to him, apparently people fucking lose it there. So yeah, I would have kind of liked to have seen that reaction out of people, but yeah, Elf was playing in the other theater, and that's where everybody else was.
Elf was free.
So, yeah, I know.
And it's Christmas season, so that's the reason why.
So, Well, Joan Allen doesn't really get many big scenes. Like, her character is totally set up for big scenes. But she doesn't really get them, which is an interesting direction to take. Because there's the haircut scene, and then there's the moment where it's like one frame. It's like one frame of Joan Allen, and it's during the interview with Wendy Cruzan shows up in this movie. Scott Calvin's ex-wife. And they're doing the Gone Girl scene. And there's this one cut really quickly to Joan Allen, like, sitting in the corner, like, all stressed out. And we only cut to her once. And as weird as it is to say, and probably would sound stupid in retrospect or whatever, that one shot we get of Joan Allen during the interview might be her best scene. And that's not to say that she's not great in the rest of them. It's just that one shot kind of says so much. So, yeah. So this movie definitely is going to test the boundaries of how much you can take emotionally in a movie. And for a movie that doesn't end in tragedy, that's a pretty good... It's kind of rare for a movie to hit that hard emotionally without being tragic in the end. I mean, there's still kind of a tragedy because she's going to be, you know... They're both going to be scarred for life in one way or another.
Oh, yeah.
But that they're going to move on brings a whole other quality to it. So, yeah, this is... Just be prepared for a roller coaster when you go into this. And yeah, that's the thing, though, is they don't really go for obvious scenes. Like, the scenes that hit you really hard are the ones they just kind of sneak up on you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're not really... Like, obviously, the whole concept in general opens up to, you know, big emotional stuff. But they do go there sometimes, but they... Yeah, it's not gonna hit you in the way you're kind of expecting it to when you hear about it being really emotional to people. So that's, yeah.
This is totally not the type of movie I would go for, and you know me that well too.
And it's from the director of Frank.
Yeah.
Which is like this really bizarre black comedy that I actually reviewed last year. So you know this already. If you saw that.
Yeah.
Or if you saw the movie itself. So, yes, this is very, yeah.
This movie's awesome.
And it's another one of those movies where when you hear, it's been out for a while, so you're afraid it's going to be overrated when you go into it. But that's thankfully not the case, so we're good.
If you have a chance to see it anywhere, go see it. It'll probably be out in more theaters now that it's got some awards love, so.
Depending on where you are.
Yeah, no lie.
Alright.
That's going to end another edition of AJ's Movie Reviews, but first, before we take it home, I need some star mounts. In the Heart of the Sea.
2.
And Room.
3.5.
I figured you were going to do that. So that ends another edition of AJ's Movie Reviews. Join us later this weekend for another Versus. Your cryptic comment is Boyhood, and I'm trying to do that on purpose. And that's going to be bringing you into next week, which AJ's Movie Reviews will be tackling Star Wars, The Force Awakens, as well as Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Road Chip, and Sisters. So that being said, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. And AJ, any parting words?